Will you remember the famous men who had to fall to rise again? So take a deep breath, pick yourself up.
Right? Right, peeps? Huh? Yes, peeps! Come on now. You haven't heard that one in ages. It's been ages. Well over a year. Longer than over a year. And it's appropriate music, considering I've been out of this charade for well over a year and haven't thought about it. Haven't really done anything. Seriously, didn't even think about it. Thought it was all done. And then this recent revelation about Bryan Kohberger withdrawing his plea or his confession. Well, curiosity got the best of me, and I went and started looking, and I can't believe that there are people still out there advocating for Bryan Kohberger's innocence, despite him confessing, and certain individuals who shall not be named well, if you're a Breaking Bad fan, you understand who I'm talking about here, right? I mean, this is from Breaking Bad, the scene where Walter White is getting his hook on, and it's crystal blue persuasion because of Walt's famous blue product. Who do we know? Amongst all the grifting content creators that was involved in that. I mean, I'm sure there's more than him that was involved in. I think a number of these content creators have done their share of drugs in their lives. I'm sure. I'm not here. I don't do things, never an addict. Always experimentation, so I know what I'm talking about.
Maybe tomorrow.
Not an addict, like a number of them apparently. They're addicted to something.
Every green field.
Maybe they should scream. Anyway, I can shut this off.
His children.
Such a great show. Best show ever. My favorite show of all time, as a matter of fact, Breaking Bad. And Better Call Saul. They're pretty much equivalent in my opinion. In fact, my wife and I just watched both of them in their entirety, and we couldn't get enough. I mean, those shows are so excellently done, mesmerizing. Great everything. Across the board, acting, writing, cinematography, you name it. Musical score, excellent in every way. And I don't give out compliments readily, so you got to earn it, and they earned it in spades. Anyway, yeah, so if you recollect from when I was doing this previously, focusing on the Bryan Kohberger case, right before I just eliminated everything and called it a day, and that was actually before Bryan Kohberger confessed, I was taking some shit. I was being literally stalked and harassed, and I really thought it was going to affect my family. It was getting that bad, so I didn't want to do that. I didn't want my family to be affected, so I just bowed out. Thought this is not worth it. And shortly thereafter, Bryan Kohberger confesses. Now remember, I was changing my tune at the end there before he confessed. And I said, I'm leaning towards guilt. And one of the big things that put me there was that K-Bar knife purchase on Amazon in March prior to him traveling to Washington State. That was one of the things. There were a number of things, but that was one of them. And boy, what do you know? A month later, I don't know, 2 months later, a month later, he confesses, accepts the plea. And it's the defense, we now know, the defense that, at least per the Netflix documentary that I just watched, it's the defense that came to the prosecution and effectively begged for a plea deal. Okay, so I thought it was said and done. That was it. I mean, I watched the proceedings. I will say that I had already exited from all this, but I watched the proceedings, and I just couldn't believe it. He just sat there stoically and got smacked up and down in the sentencing hearing. He didn't even flinch. He confessed to it all, didn't even flinch, never flinched ever. At all. I was like, man, this guy is an absolute psycho. I mean, he is an absolute psycho. But hey, I'm going to tell you, I'm open-minded. If you could try to convince me somehow now that he's innocent, despite him saying so right now, because he's going to have to prove his innocence to me right now. He is going to have to prove his innocence to me. And one of the ways he's going to have to do that is produce the knife that he purchased on Amazon in March. Produce it. He can't say, "Oh, I don't know, it was lost or it got stolen." Nope. You got to produce it. Produce the knife. If you can't produce that knife, the fact that you confessed to save your life, to save yourself from the death penalty, coupled with your DNA being on it, as we found out in those documents released, the DNA sample was much more substantial than what I had initially postulated it to be. I was misled by Blum. It was a much larger sample size than we originally thought. So there's no debate here about the sample size. And we were wrong about it surviving on that brass, or at least brass coated, or the button snap. So I don't think they're making that up. I think that's his DNA on the snap. And I'll tell you why. I also think it's his DNA on the snap. Where are they going to get Bryan Kohberger from to frame up? Okay, if you think that the sheath was just placed there, and don't get me wrong, it looks like that. You could certainly make a case for that. Oh, it looks like it's just sitting there. It's pristine. It did look pristine per the Netflix documentary, sitting there underneath the coverlet, just sticking out partially. You can see it right there, and they show a picture of it from the crime scene evidence, and you can't see blood on it at all. There's no blood on it whatsoever. So if there is, it's so faint you can't see it from those pictures. Even when they show the pictures back when they have it at the police department and they're booking it into evidence, they're showing those pictures. The scientists at the lab are showing the pictures of it. It doesn't look bloody at all, which is weird because it was supposed to be a bloodbath. But even despite that, if you think it's planted, folks, where would they get Bryan Kohberger to frame up for this? I mean, if they planted that, whoever it was, if they planted it, they had to have been setting Bryan Kohberger up. Wouldn't that be one of the first things that Bryan Kohberger said? Hey, this person stole someone stole my knife and my knife sheath, and that's probably my knife sheath because my DNA's on it, but that I was not there. Someone stole this. He didn't say any of that. None of that was ever said. And as far as I can tell, it was never going to be said. It was never going to be said. They were taken aback when the investigation revealed that they had evidence that he purchased a K-bar knife on Amazon. I think that's one of the things that they were taken aback on. It's interesting. Cy Ray was on Brian Enton. We're going to look at this. He was on Brian Enton, and he said that Ann Taylor is a firm believer in Bryan Kohberger's innocence. All the way through the plea deal, I presume is what he's saying, which, I find hard to believe. And so the title of this, should Ann Taylor be disbarred? Well, I'm thinking, actually, based on what Bryan Kohberger is saying here, if true, if true, and his family would be able to back this up, I believe, because they were in these proceedings, these plea proceedings with him, so they would be witness to this, she should be disbarred. She coerced him into lying to the court. To me, that's grounds for dismissal. I mean, that's grounds for disbarment as an attorney. So if you believe in Bryan Kohberger's innocence, and I'm not saying I do, I'll be open-minded about this, but I don't believe in his innocence at this point. He confessed. So he's got a huge mountain to climb as far as I'm concerned to get me to ever swing that way again. But if you believe this document that I'm going to read here, we're going to read here again. You read it already probably. We'll read it again. If you believe what he's saying here, then you believe that you should believe, because that's the rules, Ann Taylor should be disbarred. And I also find this funny and ironic, because I remember I took such shit from everyone that was considered a pro-burger, so to speak, for lack of a better term. Took so much shit from everybody for saying, you know what, I'm starting to lean towards guilt. Oh, the crap I took. Being called a traitor and all this and that. At times, I would talk about how I thought Ann Taylor was not the best attorney. Oh, the shit I would take. All the shit I would take. But now, I'm sure they don't think Ann Taylor's the best attorney because, you know, the pro-burger's got to get behind Bryan Kohberger, and he's saying it right here. She wasn't the best attorney. Not by a long shot. Far from it. Just like I was right about Sly Ray, and all these grifting content creators, Harsh, Lana, Pav, or Pav, whatever you want to call him, Crystal Blue Persuasion, they were all singing Sly Ray's praises. And I was calling Sly Ray out as a fraud. And now they're calling Sly Ray out as a fraud. Not because they care about why he might be a fraud, only because he no longer is in Bryan Kohberger's corner. That's the only reason they think he's a fraud now. Not for the solid, actual reasons he's a fraud, but just because he's not on their side now. Stark, raving hypocrisy. Across the board. Hypocrisy with everybody. So anyway, yeah, this, I don't want to say that I'm surprised by this. I mean, I expected that he would do some things to try to get out from under this, but this was a long time coming. Why did this take so long? I think there's some other deadline that he had for something else he could have done that he missed. So this is like the last-ditch effort from what I understand. He can't, if this gets shot down by Hitler, which it will be, this is it for him. I mean, it's it. This is it. I know someone on some channel I was watching said, about, how Bryan Kohberger wouldn't have gone into that house because there was all those cars out front. He's not suicidal. I disagree. I disagree that he's not suicidal. I think one of the big reasons for him doing this is because he is being driven literally insane in prison. He can't take it. He cannot take it, and he's being driven insane, and so he's desperate. He's desperate. And when this fails, and Hitler doesn't grant this to him, he's got nothing left. Nothing left. It's not like, if you got the death penalty, you're on death row, you have multiple appeal process. That's why it takes 40 years to execute somebody if you're going to execute them, or longer, because you have all these deferrals. You have a way of deferring it with motions and appeals and you name it. It just takes so long. And there's so much money involved in it and time. But that's not the case here. He confessed. He took the plea deal. He only has a couple of options available to him, and this will have exhausted those options. That's it. He's in a situation for life, and I think that considering that he's so desperate to perhaps do this, it reeks of desperation, that he'll commit suicide within a year or two after this, after Hitler shoots it down. So he is suicidal. So don't give me that nonsense. He absolutely is suicidal. And he'll prove it to you. He will prove it to you. So anyway, let's read through it. Okay, let's read through it. I'm not going to say that some of these points may not be valid. They might be. And if so, Ann Taylor should be disbarred. So it's interesting. This is just all in handwriting. I mean, I guess he doesn't have access to a computer to type this out or print it out. So he had to just handwrite it. So I guess that's understandable. It says, it is hereby declared that during attorney-client discussions, most of which included all members of Bryan C. Kohberger's immediate family, petitioner was convinced to falsely confess to capital murder and felony burglary by coercion, disinformation, false promises, and the withholding of exculpatory discovery. The following is material to the inception of the plea. Number 1, counsel's failure to inform petitioner of exculpatory discovery received during plea discussions, namely clumps of unknown hair found in Ethan Chapin's hands, as well as a failure of further inquiry. Number 2, petitioner was convinced that actual guilt was not an important factor in considering plea acceptance. Death row was imminent, and petitioner was advised to lie. Advised to lie. Petitioner was to gain a legal victory in entering a false plea. There you go, folks. There you go. That's grounds for disbarment. And then 3, a gross misrepresentation of, and this is what I speak about when they were convincing him and coercing him to accept the plea deal, that they made it seem like if he took the plea deal, his conditions of imprisonment would be vastly different than if he was convicted by a jury of his peers and found guilty and convicted and had to serve a sentence in prison, that the prison conditions would be different. And so they, in order to convince him of that, they told him what the conditions would be like if he wasn't on death row, as opposed to if he was on death row. So he feels that he's claiming he was lied to, and his conditions are horrible. They're just as horrible as if he was on death row. So I'm guessing that's pretty much what he's implying here. So he says a gross misrepresentation of and promises regarding what a life sentence would immediately afford petitioner, and a gross misrepresentation of death row in Idaho, including an elaborate, fabricated story of counsel's horrific experience touring an actual 8x8 death. This is Christina Randall. I'm not a fan of hers, but she had this on her site, so I'm using her. Death row cell, 8x8 death row cell, all communicated to the petitioner and his family, allegedly by IDOC through counsel, thus constituting threats and promises made to induce a plea agreement. If he's correct on this, and he can prove it, and the family backs him up on this as witnesses, then she should be disbarred. Now, is Hitler going to take any of this seriously? I don't think he's really taken anything related to Bryan Kohberger seriously heretofore. I mean, not really, right? He's denied one motion after another related to Kohberger's defense. I think it's one of the reasons one of the big reasons Ann Taylor said, you know what, this goes to court, we're going to lose, Bryan. So now it just becomes a matter of, do you want to live? Which got to be pretty sobering. if that's how that went down. But surely that's got to be part of how it went down, right? Right? I mean, Hitler shot down all their motions to get evidence disqualified, i.e. the DNA evidence on the sheath. You know, the Amazon, purchasing the K-bar knife on Amazon, all that failed. So my guess is they weren't feeling very confident going into trial that they're going to have a snowball's chance in hell. Nonetheless, it's not ethical. Is it legal to coerce your client to lie on the stand? I don't think coercing someone to lie, coaching them to lie, guiding them to lie is, in my opinion, ethical or legal, I would think. So, you know, like the title says, should Ann Taylor be disbarred? That's what Bryan Kohberger is saying here. She should be disbarred. And by virtue of the fact that we now know, because Jules is in communication with his sister at least, she indicated that the whole family believes in his innocence. So I'm assuming they think Ann Taylor should be disbarred too. And you should too if you believe in Bryan Kohberger's innocence. So he actually spoke to the New York Times. He had a phone interview with the New York Times. Amazing. I did not know this either. I just found this out today. So here it is. Man convicted in Idaho college killing seeks to take back the guilty plea. In an interview from prison, Bryan Kohberger said he had filed a petition to reopen the case. He blamed his guilty plea on false promises and wrong information. Well, in fact, Mike, if you read his statement, he said that he was told to enter a guilty plea and lie because whether he was guilty or not didn't matter. Mike Baker began covering the Idaho murders on the day they happened. He is writing a book about the case. Of course he is. Who isn't? Jeez. The criminology student, convicted last year of murdering 4 University of Idaho students in their home, is seeking to abandon his guilty plea and obtain a trial, claiming he is innocent and was misled into confessing to the high-profile killings. In an interview with the New York Times, Bryan Kohberger, who is currently serving 4 life sentences, said he had filed a petition challenging his conviction, citing concerns about how the plea deal came together. And this is Kohberger speaking. My actual innocence is my truth, and the plea, hinged on by false promises and blatant disinformation, must be withdrawn, Mr. Kohberger said in a statement provided to the Times on Sunday night. He reiterated in a phone call from prison in Idaho that he had an absolute claim of innocence. Now that's interesting, right? Right? Because this Christina Randall, whose stage notes just on, she appropriately brought up that, you know, he never ever claimed that he was innocent. In other words, he never said, "I am innocent." Even when what do you plead? In the beginning, when he was arrested, he pled no contest, and so judge had to enter a not guilty plea on his behalf. He didn't even claim his innocence then. He didn't say, "I'm innocent." Innocent, Your Honor. He didn't even say it then. And here he doesn't really say it. It's kind of couched still, in my opinion. Let's read that again. He reiterated in a phone call from prison in Idaho that he had an absolute claim of innocence. Why not just say, "I am innocent"? Why say something roundabout like, "I have an absolute claim of innocence"? What? Just say, "I am innocent." Why didn't you say it all along? Your attorney even said it at one point. She believed you were innocent. Proceeding, Mr. Kohberger had not granted an interview or made public comments before speaking with the Times. He declined to discuss any evidence or other specific details related to his innocence claim, as well as the specific concerns he had about the plea process. It is rare for defendants to win post-conviction challenges. So I guess it's not impossible, but it's rare. The family of Kaylee Gonzalez, one of the victims, said in a statement that Mr. Kohberger was like a mosquito you just can't seem to swat. The real tragedy is this. If even a fraction of the energy spent trying to free a guilty man were directed toward honoring the victims, there would be statues of them on every corner, parks bearing their names, and days set aside to remember the lives they lost at the hands of a narcissist, the statement read. The Latah County Prosecutor's Office did not return a call seeking comment. Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador, where's ICE? Right? That's Raul. That's not an American name. Where is ICE to kidnap this guy and, put him in a concentration camp for months and years and then deport him? Where is ICE? So anyway, Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador released a statement saying his heart went out to the victims' families, noting they had already endured unimaginable loss and now must face today's deeply painful news. My office stands ready to do whatever is necessary to ensure justice is fully carried out, he said. In November 2022, the 4 murders in Moscow, Idaho, a college town that had not seen a homicide in 7 years, captivated the country for weeks as investigators struggled to identify a suspect. Mr. Kohberger's arrest brought relief to the community, but also stoked further mystery and speculation as investigators never identified a motive or any previous relationship with the victims. In court, law enforcement officials outlined the evidence against Mr. Kohberger. His DNA was found on a K-bar knife sheath that had been left next to 2 of the victims, namely Kaylee and Maddie. Amazon records showed he had purchased a K-bar knife and sheath months prior. He drove a white Elantra, the type of car that investigators determined had been on surveillance video circling the crime scene and then speeding away from it. Mr. Kohberger's phone showed he was out that night with his phone turned off at the time of the murders. Mr. Kohberger declined to discuss the evidence against him in his call with the Times. He said, "The intention is for all of those questions to be investigated and answered appropriately in a trial setting." Well, that's true enough. Mr. Kohberger, who had court-appointed representation throughout the case, ending with his guilty plea, said he prepared the documentation to challenge the case on his own. So is he saying that that's what he's been doing for the past year? He's been preparing his case for trial? That's kind of putting the cart before the horse, right? I would think if he did that, I would not put it by this guy to do this. He's just weird. But what else did he have to do? So I would not put it by him to do that, as roughshod as this must be, his attempt at it. But that's putting the cart before the horse. I mean, you have to get this granted first, right? Post-conviction relief has to be granted first. I don't know. That seems odd to me, but. So he said he prepared the documentation to challenge the case on his own. So that's past tense. So they're saying he's done it. He requested to have a lawyer appointed to him going forward. In the handwritten filing made public by court officials on Monday, Mr. Kohberger focused on a claim of ineffective legal counsel. He said his lawyers failed to disclose or review exculpatory evidence and had made promises about what life in prison would look like, including details about visits and employment. These pledges, he said, had induced him to agree to the plea. After he was arrested in December 2022, Mr. Kohberger's initial lawyer said his client was eager to be exonerated. Court-appointed lawyers spent more than 2 years challenging the evidence collected against Mr. Kohberger, only for a surprise plea deal to come together a few weeks before a trial was to begin. Mr. Kohberger accepted responsibility for the murders at a July 2025 hearing. He was not required to offer a motive for the killings, and never has, which was a massive mistake on the part of the prosecution. Despite what Vivian and other guilters say, it was a massive mistake. They could have put all this to rest if they had him agree to that. I think they call it allocution. If they had him agree to, give details about the crime. Where's the murder weapon? Where's the K-bar knife and the sheath? How come there's no blood traipsed throughout the crime scene? Did you clean it up? Did you clean up the blood in your car? How did you go about that? All answers to all these questions. What was your motive? Have him give as much detail as possible so that it could corroborate the evidence you have, and it could put all this to rest. By the the cult that's formed around him at this point, and it is a cult, no doubt about it. It's as much a cult as MAGA is a cult. He was not required to offer a motive for the killings, although he should have been, and never has. The lack of a detailed confession outraged some of the victims' family members and even President Trump, oh my God, who had called on the judge to demand an explanation from Mr. Kohberger. Whatever. In court, the judge asked Mr. Kohberger, "Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?" "Yes," Mr. Kohberger responded. He later sat in silence at a sentencing hearing at which family members of the victims expressed their grief and anger. In the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, after a typical... Well, we all know the details of that. One of the experts who worked on Mr. Kohberger's defense team has taken particular issue with the plea arrangement and the evidence. Brent Turvey, a forensic scientist who analyzed the crime scene for the defense, argued that the crime was committed by multiple perpetrators, criticized how investigators documented evidence, and questioned why more testing was not done of a hair found with one of the victims. The lawyers who served as Mr. Kohberger's defense team have rebuked Mr. Turvey, telling the Idaho Statesman that he is now speaking about topics that are still confidential, many of which are outside of his areas of expertise. The lawyers did not immediately respond to a request for comment Monday. Mr. Turvey's concerns were included in a book about the case, Broken Plea, of course. Of course. It's another, he's got a vested interest in saying this, right? Because he wants to sell a book. Of course he's going to say he wants to sell a book. I know over at Harsh's venue, I left a comment about, producing the K-bar knife, telling us where the K-bar knife is. If he purchased a K-bar knife and it still exists and it wasn't used in the crime, produce it. Produce the K-bar knife. Now, we know he can't. Well, why can't he? Oh, well, 1 million people own K-bar knives. Yeah, but 1 million people, all those million people, their DNA is not on a knife sheath, K-bar knife sheath found at the crime scene. So that's a red herring. And then a retort to me at Harsh's venue was, Jonathan Grisham is writing a book about this. Do you think he would write a book about someone who isn't innocent? Oh my God. What? Okay. It's as simple as this. Produce the K-bar knife. It's as simple as that. I already established long ago, we established, some of us, not just me, but I did, including, that was a Hyundai Elantra in the neighborhood. Absolutely was. And the most recent picture I saw, one of them from the 1122 King Road camera, actually shows that it is an Elantra on one of those passes. It's when it makes the turn and goes right. One time, you can see the bank of windows. It matches the Elantra bank of windows to a T. And then another time when it's making the turn and going towards the King Road house, it goes past and you can see the bank of windows. So it's only like a second. You can see that bank of windows. It matches the Elantra to a T. So it's not just the one in the back of the development that I had analyzed ad nauseum, which also shows the Elantra in the years in which his car is within that range. That one from the house in the back neighborhood, I had shown, and I saw footage of it again, it absolutely is the year range that his car is in, the broken down year range, not from like 2011 to 2020, but actually from 2014 to 2015. Yeah. So it includes his vehicle in that smaller range. It has those bottom reflector lights on the bumper that wrap around the side, but they're not too wide like the 2016, 2017. Or 2017, 2018, I forget which one it is, but it's been a while. But yeah, so that is his year range for sure. Mr. Kohberger alluded to those issues in his statement, saying that unanswered questions seem to multiply with each piece of discovery unsealed. He said he was okay that a new trial would mean the prospect of a potential death penalty. Okay, but why weren't you okay with that in the beginning? Why am I breaking my silence? Mr. Kohberger said Sunday in the interview from the Idaho Maximum Security Institution just south of Boise. A lot went wrong in those plea discussions. I really do want that to be heard. Okay. Yeah, that's valid. If he was coerced, then this is something valid. And I would think that the Idaho bar would take a strong look at Ann Taylor. But it's just simply, he was promised a rose garden, and it's not a rose garden. In other words, it was promised he would have better conditions by accepting 4 life sentences and confessing versus going to trial and being convicted and getting the death penalty. Was he promised it would be a bed of roses? In the plea agreement that Mr. Kohberger signed, he acknowledged that he knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently waives all rights to appeal any and all issues in this case. Still, defendants can make other claims about the legal process through post-conviction relief. Mr. Kohberger was raised in Pennsylvania, okay, we don't need to know all that. That's all that doesn't matter. Yeah. I'm open, like I said, I'm open-minded. I'll be open-minded here. But he did confess. If he had no problem going to trial, facing the death penalty, or he has no problem with that now, why did he have a problem with it a year ago? It's ironic. Harsh, like so many others, is cashing in on this and just can't let it go. Nobody can let it go. This is the gift that keeps giving, this case, right? And Bryan Kohberger, he is the gift that keeps giving. I mean, think of the money that Pav has made on it so far. I think someone said he's now making like at least a couple thousand a month. And that's been going on for a couple of years. It's ramped up some since then, but let's say he's made $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on it so far. I wonder if he's declaring. You declaring that on your taxes, pal? I guess it doesn't matter with Trump's IRS. It doesn't matter. They don't care. Or is that just the millionaires or billionaires they don't care about that are defrauding the government of taxes? Who knows? But he declaring that? Are any of these guys declaring their taxes on their YouTube earnings, I wonder? That would be a treasure trove for the IRS, I think, considering that's the only jobs available in America right now. At least are YouTube content creator jobs. That's the only thing you can do now. Anybody, apparently. The Lord knows there's no manufacturing jobs anymore. You can do that, or you can do nails, right? There's a nail parlor. Well, there's actually more than one on every block. There's like 10 nail parlors on every block, and tattoo parlors. Nail parlors and tattoo parlors and fast food restaurants. That's America, baby. That and content creators. Anyway, I was looking to see if Ann Taylor had any response to this. I came across this. I just found it funny because here's our friend JLR or JRL. And he says, Ann Taylor is filing an affidavit claiming her representation of Bryan Kohberger was legally adequate. She is also waiving attorney-client privilege. This is JRL. He doesn't support this with any documentation that this is true. So some of these people are like, yeah, it's JRL, so take it with a grain of salt. And I agree with that. But this person says something interesting. So if Ann's going to have to repudiate this. I'm sorry, she's going to have to, because otherwise I would think there would be an investigation by the Idaho bar. So she's going to have to defend herself on this. So if she does, this is what this person says. Just some general info, because I'm a lawyer and I'm bored. An attorney generally cannot just waive the attorney-client privilege because that privilege belongs to the client. However, when BK claimed ineffective assistance of counsel and called into question Ann Taylor's representation, he essentially gave an implied waiver on that privilege. Even though that privilege is considered waived, it is limited to the extent necessary for the attorney to defend themselves. So this other person responds, I know you specified just to defend herself, and I imagine for professionalism and escaping public scrutiny, she wouldn't do anything too wild with that freedom. But in the extremely unlikely event of a trial, could she be pushed to testify about anything more than her performance, his understanding of case plea info? I doubt he said anything intentionally incriminating to her, but one wonders what may have slipped or been said in earshot, written down that she might have seen, etc. I don't think the attorney-client privilege relates to that. So I think it just relates to anything that was discussed in regard to his claim that he was coerced to take the plea deal. And that would be a tricky case for a judge, wouldn't it? Because we're going to talk about navigating a minefield. Because, like they're saying here, this is not something you want to get too wild about, breaking attorney-client privilege. And then there's other people. It's impossible for him to argue he wasn't given accurate. That's, no, it's not impossible. That's what he's doing. Okay. So are the odds stacked against him tremendously? Yeah, absolutely. We just said that it's very rare that you get post-conviction relief. So, and considering Hitler's track record with this and how Hitler went out of his way to ask him 10 times over, are you sure you want to plead guilty? And Bryan Kohberger said, yeah, I'm sure. Well, yeah, highly improbable. Highly improbable that it's going to go down. Now, that being said, how about Cy Ray? I called out Cy Ray and was beaten up mercilessly over it. Was I ever? I was in a severe minority when it came to Cy Ray and his track software and what a fraud he was and how many people must have been falsely convicted based on the results from using his track software. It's been used in at least thousands of cases. It might even be tens of thousands of cases to convict people. Some of those, we know those people were innocent. And so his track software was used to convict innocent people. How many, we don't know. I would imagine it could be in the hundreds. It could absolutely be in the hundreds. That's a lot of people in prison that are innocent. I called that out long ago, while Pav and Harsh and Lana, Banana, and all the rest were singing his praises arrogantly and hypocritically. Anyway, Cy Ray was on Brian Enton, as most of you may have known. And he said something very interesting. And nobody wants to listen to Cy Ray now. They just want to discard him. I'm going to listen to him because when someone says GPS, my antennas go up. GPS is not track software. He may gather GPS data and incorporated into his Trax software program, but GPS is above and beyond his program, his software program. It transcends it. It speaks for itself. It's mutually exclusive from his program in regard to interpreting results. It's the end-all be-all. And so he said something very interesting in the Brian Entin interview related to GPS data. And this is the first I've heard of this. Is he lying? I don't know. He could be. I mean, in my opinion, he's a fraud. So he could be, absolutely, he could be lying. He's not under oath here. Someone at Harsh's Venues had said that under oath, he said that there is nothing in the records from AT&T that indicate that Bryan Kohberger was anywhere near the 1122 King Road house during the time of the massacre, or before, or after. And they looked like they were quoting it verbatim. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't see that. If that's true, then either he's telling the truth there in court and lying now, or he perjured himself in court and he's telling the truth now. So the best way to prove this is show us what you got. If you make this claim, show us what you have. Here we go. Listen to him.
Innocent. So I want you guys to hear the whole thing in this episode of Bryan Entin Investigates.
Cy, it's nice to see you, Steve. Thank you for being here as always. And I know Olivia's going to join us in a little bit. She's dealing with the baby. But I wanted to continue this conversation from the time you just had on News Nation. And I know, Steve, that you and Olivia wanted an opportunity to be able to talk to Cy about some of the information that he has, since he was a defense witness for Bryan Kohberger. I just wanted to ask one question before I throw it over to Steve, though, and it kind of plays off some of what you said on News Nation, Cy. You talked about Bryan Kohberger potentially being at the house before. Can you elaborate on that a little more? I mean, are you able to, and I know it's not exact, but are you able to say whether he was actually inside the house?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little bit more responsive on these questions and drag it out a little bit. So if I'm going on and on, stop me.
Yeah, but you can do that on this. We have unlimited time, so feel free.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 100%, like, I'll make myself available to the family, by the way, 24/7. Like, if you guys have follow-up questions going forward, by all means. When I heard that you guys wanted to have this conversation, I actually, it meant a lot to me, and I was like, oh, finally, I can talk to the victim's family, because I've spent my entire career advocating for victims' families. I've done a lot of stuff with parents of murdered children, and this is a very hard place that it started out trying to be at, and I really appreciate you guys reaching out. And anytime you have questions, I'll give you my direct number. By all means, feel free. You guys can hit me up anytime.
Thank you.
But what I want to cover on that piece is, when we start looking at the house itself, there's a couple different things we can look at. AT&T has a very specific report, and it's called Lokdebor. And I know it sounds like a silly word. It's LOCDBOR, Lokdebor, and it's Location Database of Record. This will include estimated latitude and longitudes, and they range from 25 meters out to 3,000, 30,000 meters, so they can get very big. Historically, there's accuracy issues with this report. So if you just take all the data and you throw it on the map and you think that's accurate, you're going to have a lot of problems. A really good example in this case is there's a time when Bryan goes up to Seattle, and one of his Lokdebor hits shows him in New Orleans. So that gives you an idea of the accuracy issues. There's two factors, and like I said, I'm going to pile on a lot of data for you guys. The next thing that comes into play is the actual handset, the phone itself. iPhone actually restricts a lot of third-party apps and even the mobile carrier to some points of getting precise location data.
By the way, just want to intervene real quick. He's right about that Lokdebor file. Okay, it's that if you're just relying on that, it's highly inaccurate. Highly inaccurate for the reasons you just stated. So there's nothing wrong with what he said so far there. Okay, nothing wrong with what he said so far there.
Which a lot of people don't realize. If I try to ping a phone, that phone ping can actually be screwed up by Apple itself. To instead of getting this nice, neat little GPS, I get this 5,000 meter GPS range, and you can be anywhere in that 5,000 meters. Samsung, on the other hand, is a very chatty phone. It's preloaded with all kinds of silly apps and ridiculous monitoring. If anybody's ever had a Samsung, when you first power that thing up, like there's 100 apps on that thing. It's good for law enforcement because when we get a phone that's a Samsung phone, it's typically very chatty on the network. We're going to see a lot more connectivity. Samsung's also unique that if I do certain things with certain apps that require location data, such as GPS or navigation, that accuracy from the 3,000 or the 5,000 meter ranges come down to 25 meters. And in this particular case, if you look at those precise measurements, there's probably 5 that land directly on what would be the living room of the house. Like the latitude, longitude is the physical house itself. And, if you put the house back on the map and you map those, the hits are inside the house. Now,
I'm going to let you keep explaining. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So, because I haven't heard this before. So you're saying based on the data you saw, the latitude, longitude for Bryan Kohberger's Samsung was in the living room?
the AT&T derived latitude longitude from the AT&T's network that it estimates a location, it lands in the house. And it's a 25 meter range. So, we're talking 75 feet. So it could be anywhere in the house on any floor. It could technically be outside the house. It could be on the property, but it's showing in the immediate area. My personal opinion is when I look at those and I map what's happening before and after, and I'm looking at all the other evidence, I think these are accurate locations. And to Steve's point earlier, this is why court, I think, is so critical for this case. That's an argument to be had in front of the jury where the defense would come in and say, hey, you can't reliably say this. And the prosecution would say, here's why. When done right, I feel that they're reliable.
So when you say accurate locations, you mean you believe based on your expertise that he was inside the house on previous occasions?
So I'll qualify a handful of things tonight. And again, Steve, any questions that later on, by all means, hit me up. I'm more than happy to pour over anything you want to. One of the things the defense did with me early on in this case is they got outside of the geolocation data and they said, hey, as a former homicide cop, as a homicide sergeant, as a supervisor that supervises these type of investigations, we're interested in anything you can find. And they poured tons of data over. Why that's important too is it's not just the phone stuff. There's a lot of stuff inside the crime scene and things that I've reviewed in the crime scene. I 100% believe that the offender, who is Bryan Kohberger, like there is no alternative theory in my head at this point. He's been in the house before. I think there's absolutely no doubt he was familiar with the basic layout of the house. I'm not saying he was intimately familiar with the entire house, but he had a working knowledge of the house. That house is laid out very weird. I've been through the house. The path that was taken, what we see is what occurred in that house, him coming and going from the neighborhood, there's prior knowledge. There's no doubt in my mind that there's prior knowledge. So that also helps support some of this. One thing I want to kind of circle back to, Bryan, and Steve, you'll find this in my report, and it took me weeks to get the defense to allow me to put this in my report. They didn't want me to put it in there. There are third-party databases that collect what is called MAID ID, so mobile advertiser ID. And you guys have all experienced this where you've searched for, I don't know, a pair of shoes. You've Googled a new pair of shoes you think you wanted. And then 2 days later, you're surfing the internet and some ads are popping up for those shoes. That's based on your mobile advertiser ID. It's a unique number, but there's third-party databases that collect that. And typically when they're collecting that type of information, it gets a latitude, longitude stamp with a timestamp. So we can actually see. Law enforcement can access those databases. You have to have a search warrant. There's a process to go through. In my report, what you'll find is it's towards the very end of it. I actually lay out that, hey, there's more than reasonable suspicion here to believe that this phone has been inside the residence or very close to the residence on these dates. Typical criminal investigation, we would go look at these third-party databases, pull all the mobile advertiser ID data from those dates. Forget the 13th. His phone is off. We're never going to get his phone in or near the house on the 13th, and that's where all the focus was. But if we go back to pattern of life and we pull these other dates leading up to the crime, I feel incredibly confident that they're going to get precise GPS. Now I'm talking 3 meters, so now we're talking less than 10 feet at, around, and very close to the house on these different occasions. The idea that I put this in my report and said, this is the kind of follow-up I would expect to have, and nobody ever, I fully expected as soon as I dropped that report that January, that by February, March, we were going to see discovery on.
So I was wrong. I misunderstood what he was saying here. So this is conjecture on his part. He is conjecturing that Bryan Kohberger was either in the house or just immediately outside of it on any number of occasions prior to the night of the massacre. And that is based off of those third-party data. And the reason he included in his report to Ann Taylor back when he was on the defense's team is he said, they never even went and tried to get this. So if they decide after the fact to go and try to get this, the possibility exists that that data could be on there. So you need to be aware of that. I think that's what his report's saying. And then I'm sure he's playing along with the defense, and he's like, if your client's, innocent, then there won't be anything on there, but you just need to be aware this could blindside you. And I think that's what he's talking about, his incompleteness theory in regard to the investigation. They didn't button this up. They didn't cross their T's and dot their I's in regards to filling out the data set. And this is one such instance where they didn't fill out the data set. They didn't even bother to try to get this information because this is GPS information, which, remember, I always stated, if I was investigating this, I would want all the GPS data I could get before, during, and after. I would want to see it all. I would want to see if he was ever close to that house. If any data like that were to be available, I would want to see it. So what he's saying is, now he's saying, so we got, how AT&T gives an idea of where he may be longitudinally and latitudinally, but it's, it can be anywhere from 25 meters to 500 or 100 meters or 25 meters to 500, 300 meters, whatever. He's now saying he thinks that means or indicates that that's accurate and he was near the house. Well, there's a big difference, in my opinion, between 25 meters and 500 meters, whatever. That's a big difference, right? That's significant. However, he's saying now that based on that, and he believes those estimates are accurate, that doesn't necessarily put you, right there in the neighborhood. But considering that data exists on him, it now makes it, in his mind, extremely likely, if not, absolutely, that any third-party data that has GPS coordinates for him, like before the night of the massacre, would corroborate AT&T's data and show that indeed, yes, he was not only within 25 meters, but it pinpoints him right in the house. That's what he's saying. And that's effectively what he would do with his track software. He would get this. He would. In my opinion, I feel like he reverse engineered his track software was just reverse engineering. He used GPS data, and then he reverse engineered those coordinates into his track software and finessed it to give him the results on the track software that he wanted to validate the GPS data. Which is that's fraudulent. I mean, because what do you get? You have the GPS data first and foremost. It led the way always. It led the way. You can make. And his track software can give him the answers that he wants. He's even said that. He finesses it. It can give him the answers he wants. So my concern would be about innocent people that are in jail because of his track software is when there was no GPS data available. And they just purely relied on the track software. As we saw in the Colorado case, the GPS data, because he claims that the people in law enforcement there did not use his track software correctly. I guess meaning, i.e., they didn't reverse engineer it from the GPS data to the software and finesse the software to make it validate the GPS data. Instead, they just ran the software without any finesse and ran with that, never thinking that they had to get GPS data. When they got the GPS data, it showed them on the other side of town when they claimed that he was stalking that alleged perp was allegedly stalking his ex-girlfriend. See where I'm going with that? So that's why he's a fraud. But now he's convinced he was in the house. Of course he is, because he's Steve's buddy. So once again, I'm not making the case for or against Bryan Kohberger here. I'm just making the case for truth. I want to know the truth. Okay? Did they ever get this information from the third-party databases? I'm going to guess they never did. Nobody ever did. And I think the statute of limitations has run its course on that. I'm sure that doesn't exist any longer. So that information probably doesn't even exist any longer. So it's just he knows he's safe in discussing this. Okay, he knows he's safe in discussing this because it's something that he can never get corrected on, because you'll never have that information to say you were wrong. He wasn't there. He knows that. He's sly and sly. He's sly enough to know that he can never be contradicted on this. And he gets in Steve Gonzalez's graces, good graces. It's all so deceitful. All the way around, it's so deceitful. Well, anyway, here we have it. This is going to be short-lived. I mean, me looking at this case, because I don't think Hitler's going to grant this post-conviction relief. And that's it for Bryan Kohberger. I would say look for him to probably commit suicide within a year or two after Hitler's decision, because I think he's the type of person, he just cannot take it. He will not be able to take it. So death would be a better outcome for him in his mind at that point. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts. If you have an open mind and search for the truth here, just have an open mind and search for the truth. Just because a case is weird and bizarre doesn't mean that the person that was accused was innocent, okay? What it does mean, first and foremost, is we are not availed of all the information. We still aren't. And law enforcement is still not forthcoming with all this information. So you must have full transparency to get to the truth, and we don't have that yet. But, like I said, he confessed, folks. That's huge. That's huge. I'm sorry, it's huge with me. I was leaning guilty even before he confessed. And when he confessed, after I decided to, exit stage right, that validated my suspicions and concerns. So yeah, let me know what you think. Until next time, take care, everybody. Bye.